We are tweeting live from Gateway House IND with the hashtag GOID 2016. Join us for live updates and have your say too. Once again, a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Ministry of External Affairs and Gateway House Mumbai, I welcome you to the inaugural Gateway of India Dialogue. The theme of today's session is aligning business and strategic goals. To deliver the welcome remarks, I'm delighted to introduce the Chief Executive of Gateway House, Mr. Blaise Fernandes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the opening session of the inaugural Gateway of India Dialogue. A very warm welcome and thank you to the Honorable Sri Lankan Deputy Foreign Minister, Dr. Harsha de Silva, for agreeing to participate in the Gateway of India Dialogue this evening. We welcome Foreign Secretary Dr. S. Jaishankar, our keynote speaker this evening, who will enumerate his ideas on aligning business and strategic goals. We also welcome Mr. Adi Godrej, Chairman of the Godrej Group, who will give us the industry's views of our foreign policy. On behalf of Gateway House, I welcome ambassadors, consul generals, members of the diplomatic corps, our panelists, moderators, and members of the media and delegates to this conference of ours. Earlier today, we held the T20 conference, which has nothing to do with cricket. T20, or Think Tank 20, is a sub-forum of the G20, an ideas bank for the G20, where policy experts provide research-based solutions to the G20 leaders. This is the second consecutive year that Gateway House has played Sherpa to the T20 consultations, and we look forward to working with our German counterparts next year when Germany takes over the presidency in 2017. Foreign Secretary, sir, should 2018 or 2019 be the year of the Indian presidency at the G20, Gateway House is well positioned to perform its role as a think tank Sherpa, and the city of Bombay and Mumbai is fully geared to play the host city. Gateway House thanks the Ministry of External Affairs, which is co-hosting this first Gateway of India Dialogue in Mumbai, a city with very strong international linkages. Mumbai has a very special place for us at Gateway House. Gateway House, led by our adjunct fellow for Bombay History Studies, Ms. Sifra Lenton, has chronicled the city's rich international linkages dating from 1665 to 1960. We request you, Foreign Secretary, sir, to please release her book titled Bombay's International Linkages, Then and Now, later this evening. We will be accepting questions for the Foreign Secretary. Post a speech, the questions will be answered. There are pads on your table with pencils. Please write down your questions, identify yourself. We have two moderators in voice, Elvira, who's there, and Kunal on that corner. They'll take your questions and Foreign Secretary will answer these questions, try and stick to trade and business. I now invite Mr. Adi Godrej, one of Gateway House's foremost members and supporters, to give his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaise. Minister De Silva, Mr. Jaishankar, ladies and gentlemen. This conference is part of a well-thought-out strategy by the Government of India to pursue a new style of economic diplomacy, one where India talks business and where India's businessmen become part of the country's global strategic efforts. This is the first time Mumbai, the commercial capital of the country, is hosting a conference of this nature with the Ministry of External Affairs, which I think is a welcome development. It is a recognition by the government of the role that Mumbai and its business plays in this endeavor. The role of institutions like Gateway House, which is the only foreign policy research institute in Mumbai, doing a tremendous job in the enhancement of this goal is, to my mind, very important. The Godrej Group supports such institution building in Mumbai so that the city may regain its premier role in India. The Indian economy is already the fastest growing major economy in the world. Our macroeconomic fundamentals are on a sound footing. With the development of the La Nina effect in the Pacific Ocean and the probability of 3 to 4 good monsoons in a row as a result, and the likelihood of the Goods and Services Tax constitutional amendment being passed in the monsoon session, we could be headed for a much higher growth rate, perhaps even double-digit growth. In order to complement such growth, Indian business will need to move strongly overseas. The Godrej Group has benefited tremendously by establishing ourselves strongly overseas in about 25 countries, mainly in the developing world. Similarly, India will need to attract foreign direct investment across the board to support the capital needs as well as technology and the expertise needed. I feel this sort of a dialogue will play a tremendous role in getting business and government working together to see that the country's progress is accelerated even further. Thank you very much.
I now call upon Dr. Harsha de Silva for his keynote.
Mr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, Foreign Secretary, Mr. Ari Godrej, Chairman, Godrej Group, Mr. Blaise Fernandes, CEO of Gateway House, Excellencies, distinguished guests, academics, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Let me first thank Gateway House and the Ministry of External Affairs for including Sri Lanka as a stakeholder of this first major geo-economic policy dialogue here in dynamic and progressive Mumbai city I've been visiting since 1997. I've seen this city move from where it was to where it is, and I see the foundations for it to move far beyond where it is today. I hope the seed that we sow today will bear fruit as both India and Sri Lanka move towards our foreign policy objectives by leveraging the hugely positive changes taking place in our neighborhood. President Pranab Mukherjee, then Finance Minister, delivering the Lakshman Kadrigama lecture in Colombo in late 2009, said, "The future of peace, security, and development of our region has to be fortified by common economic prosperity. The challenge today is to build interdependencies which not only integrate our region, but also create strong interest in each other's stability and prosperity. True then, now, and certainly into the future." In fact, it was Lakshman Kadrigama, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka, who forwarded the thesis that India and Sri Lanka should work together to build on our shared geography, history, and culture in a relationship he defined that should be in the state of irreversible excellence. I believe what he meant was that this relationship must benefit each other in their bilateral transactions and together must benefit both in transactions with others. So the mere fact that I'm here this evening is a big step in shaping the new paradigm of integrated economic diplomacy between us and beyond. Talking of economic diplomacy between our two countries, I hear that our Consul General in Mumbai is doing a pretty decent job on a day-to-day basis. Ladies and gentlemen, let us survey the context of today's engagement. Geopolitics meets business. While the GPS of our nations have remained static over millennia, on almost every other measure, the world's center of gravity is shifting towards the east. By 2030, Asia is projected to become the world's largest economic region. And by 2013, for the first time in modern history, Asian defense spending is estimated to have exceeded that of Europe. In this backdrop, Sri Lanka, as a small but increasingly more strategically important island in this emerging large and powerful Asian neighborhood, must determine the optimal navigational strategy in order to meet its macro objectives. In a speech given by our current Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mangala Samaravira, in Colombo last year, speaking on the new opportunities and risks associated with this changing landscape, he reiterated that change, however significant, would not alter our fundamental foreign policy objectives. Ensuring the security of all Sri Lankans and advancing their development will always be at the core of our government's duties in the foreign policy realm. Over the last few years, however, Sri Lankan foreign relations were not aligned to our country's needs. While the interest of a few was served, the needs of many were ignored. Our relations faced many challenges, between India and Sri Lanka, as you very well know. As we now reset our foreign policy, we are gearing our strategy and policies towards strengthening our relationship with India, harnessing the opportunities the Asian century has to offer, while navigating and minimizing the risks that will inevitably accompany her rise. In this context, it is most important to understand the relations between Sri Lanka and India in our engagement with the region from our vantage point. Both ancient history and contemporary experience suggest that Sri Lanka's success depends on maintaining friendly and intimate ties with India. India is our closest neighbor, the world's fastest growing large economy, the most populous democracy, our largest source of tourists, and the people with whom we've shared such strong ancient and contemporary civilizational ties. At the same time, our ability to integrate with the region while maintaining a strong and healthy relationship with the subcontinent has always paid rich dividends. I like to go back to the thinking of Minister Samaravira to seek an answer to what is meant by region. Is Sri Lanka a South Asian nation, or is it an Indian Ocean country? Throughout its ancient history, Sri Lanka had close links with the entire Indian Ocean rim, spanning from Africa, the Arabian Gulf, Persia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Australia. A classic example is the reign of the much adored King Parakramabahu the Great from 1153 to 1186. Many of whom you may have visited Sri Lanka may have visited a place called Polonnaruwa, from where he reigned. The chronicle Chulavamsa and other chronicles, along with the archaeological excavations, provide ample evidence of our engagements with the Indian Ocean countries and beyond. Ships had come from these countries to Sri Lanka filled with numerous products. They had been stockpiled and resold to traders who had visited the island from various other parts of the world, giving rise to substantiated speculation that Sri Lanka was an important entrepot trading center at that time. Coins issued by the monarchs of China, Cambodia, Persia, Middle East, Egypt, and Greece had been found almost throughout the country, relating to this period, signifying the trade relations he would have had at the time. The fact is that Sri Lanka, geographically located in the center of the Indian Ocean and sitting astride the major east-west and south-south trade routes, is at the crossroads of the Indian Ocean world. However, over time, we had become classified as a South Asian country, and our own imaginations and those of others turned towards the Indian hinterland. But once again, in the current context, in a comparative sense, we are also the exception to the South Asian identity. Reclaiming our Indian Ocean identity beyond South Asia, which we are now engaged in, will help us and others unlock the tremendous opportunities Sri Lanka possesses for mutual benefit in creating the new reality in the emerging Asian century. Sri Lanka, I believe, should be looked at in that light when discussing the various topics by Indian policymakers and business people during the course of this dialogue. Such an outcome will help create larger markets to increase trade and foreign investments, open the economies to the outside world, enhance the credibility of national reforms and policies, provide an opportunity to strengthen common positions at international fora, and help to reduce or resolve interstate conflicts. Efforts to develop our region should not be considered solely as a means to accelerate economic growth, but also as an effective mechanism to address broader socioeconomic and environmental issues facing the region. In moving the agenda forward, we are now working with new vigor. We have begun to put in place policies to improve our trade to GDP ratio, which had fallen by almost half in the last decade or so. This is something most people don't know, that the policies that the previous government followed essentially brought exports to GDP down from 35% to 15%, which we are certainly committed to turn around and take to a far higher double-digit figure. Removing trade barriers, promoting free trade agreements, and generally tilting the economy towards the production of more tradable goods and services have already begun. As most of you are aware, India and Sri Lanka entered into a structured trade framework since December 1998 with signing of the Sri Lanka-India Free Trade Agreement. The agreement has produced results over the years despite some areas of contention due to lack of proper understanding and adjustment of the basic concept for overall trade. We hope that the contentious issues can be sorted out soon and the Economic and Technical Cooperation Agreement, or ETCA, between our two countries can become reality soon, which will open new opportunities in trade, in services, and much needed investments. We are in the process of deepening our free trade agreement with Pakistan. We are also negotiating a free trade agreement with China. The agreements with China, India, and Pakistan will give us preferential access to a market of almost 3 billion people, certainly a rare, if not a unique, selling point. We are also exploring the possibility of signing agreements with several other countries, including Singapore and Turkey in the near term. In addition, we are assessing the merits of seeking to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership in time to come. Already, Indian business understands the value of using the ports of Colombo, both sea and air, and we are in the process of adding capacity to both. In the recent past, 70 to 80% of TEUs handled by the Colombo port was transshipment to India. And I was talking to Mr. Godrej earlier where he said, and something I hadn't been thinking about, is that perhaps that transshipment, or in other words, production can happen in Sri Lanka for southern Indian states, as opposed to producing in India and transporting down to some of the southern Indian states. With liberal air connectivity between the two countries and 120 weekly flights, Sri Lankan Airlines earns 40% of its revenue from these routes. So the possibilities for India and Sri Lanka will become endless as we become the Indian Ocean hub, with equidistance between the West and the Far East. That opportunity between Singapore and Dubai for so long in the modern times had been underutilized. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish all participants fruitful deliberations for a prosperous regional engagement that is mutually beneficial. I thank Gateway House and the Ministry of External Affairs for having invited me. It's been a pleasure addressing you all. Thank you very much.
Before I invite Dr. Jaishankar for the keynote address, our Twitter handle is Gateway House IND and the hashtag is GOID2016. Please do tweet, and you can also tweet your questions for the panels today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Minister Harsha de Silva, Mr. Adi Godrej, Mr. Blaise Fernandes, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all this evening to the Gateway of India dialogue on where geopolitics meets business. The opening session, quite appropriately, is themed on aligning business and strategic goals. In India, there is probably no better place than Mumbai to carry forward such a discussion. The Ministry of External Affairs is particularly pleased to support this event and to partner with Gateway House in this endeavor. An impressive program awaits you all tomorrow, and I would like to thank all those who have made it possible. The connection between business and diplomacy is self-evident. Indeed, business has driven national and group strategies virtually over the entire course of human history. The issue, therefore, is less about correlation and more of the extent of the centrality of business to the formulation of strategy. Indian experience since independence reveals that the growing salience of business at home is reflected abroad as well. An era of greater state control and direction obviously had its particular brand of diplomacy. With changing times and higher growth, a new mindset has gradually come into place. There is a sharper realization that the real strengths of any nation are primarily economic. That, in turn, has led to a growing recognition that business provides the ballast for many of our important international relationships. The ASEAN, the Gulf, the US, and China are examples. It is the primary driver in some, perhaps a little less salient in others, but never entirely absent. In contentious situations, business can serve as a mitigating factor, and where strategic imperatives are less pronounced in Europe, Latin America, or parts of Africa, business is actually our main connect. As we now look beyond narrower economic reform towards a much broader modernization effort, its relevance to our engagement with the world is only stronger. India's approach to aligning business and strategic goals bears some similarity to the experiences of East Asian and Southeast Asian polities as they traversed their particular path of national development. Increasingly, our foreign policy is dominated by the quest for capital, resources, technology, capabilities, and best practices. They have become the benchmarks to judge the success or otherwise of policies and interactions. It is telling that considerable efforts are invested to encourage the involvement of external partners in development programs like Digital India, Skill India, Smart Cities, or Namami Gange. When a Prime Minister goes to Hanover to showcase Make in India, or to San Francisco to unveil Startup India, clearly we are entering a different era. It is one where making it easier to do business is a key element of our strategy. Today, every embassy has a designated commercial officer. We are the first port of call, not just for Indian businesses going out, but increasingly for foreign businesses coming in. There is a division in the Foreign Ministry tasked to handhold foreign investors. Creating a better enabling environment for business is our daily mantra. And addressing the political and regulatory impediments is very much at the heart of our diplomatic agenda. This is a very different foreign service from the one I joined 4 decades ago. Underlying the endeavor to align business and strategic goals is our shifting understanding of the world itself. A period of extraordinary change began with the end of the Cold War and the economic rise of Asia. It was further underlined by the 2008 crisis that brought out the redistribution of power in the global order. But perhaps even more impactful are the daily consequences of multiple technology revolutions. To a country like India, they offer immense leapfrogging possibilities. It is not just the power hierarchy that is changing. The actual interplay of nation states is clearly circumscribed by growing interdependence. The global strategic landscape, in fact, looks increasingly like a business environment. Its key concepts are risk assessments, convergence, margins, competition, leveraging, and hedging. Different partners, some with competing interests, often have to be simultaneously engaged. If operations have become more nuanced, challenges in international politics too are more blurred. Nothing is absolute anymore. Those who can comprehend this changing paradigm will surely get ahead. Conversely, those who cannot are destined to be trapped in old debates. With this background, it's useful to evaluate how India's capabilities and requirements will impinge on its global strategy. Let me begin with resources. In our case, the most important of them being the human one. Whether India really reaps the demographic dividend or not depends on our economic growth, the expansion of manufacturing, the success of skilling initiatives, and the spread of education, literacy, and health. Clearly, these are policy outcomes and not a foregone conclusion. But as prospects improve, we must assess the importance of the availability and accessibility of human resources to an aging world. While they may have political and social repercussions, the economic logic of changing production and skill centers is hard to ignore. Global trade discussions cannot indefinitely front-load goods and investments at the cost of services and labor mobility. Then there is the question of how we see the implications of expanding manufacturing at home. Make in India is not make for India. While we may legitimately exploit our domestic market advantages, the real game is to integrate more deeply into the global supply chain and gain better market access abroad. Indeed, striking an optimal balance between these competing factors is at the heart of our trade strategy. Insofar as our resource dependence is concerned, probably the one most worthy of strategizing is that relating to energy. Not coincidentally, it is also the domain that has seen the greatest activism in our recent diplomatic interactions. Where fossil fuel is concerned, one objective is to obtain assured upstream access in producing economies like Russia, Iran, UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, or Mexico. Another is to secure greater investment in downstream areas. But with the world moving towards greener and cleaner energy, and given our own commitment to shift to 40% non-fossil power generation capacity by 2030, attention is increasingly shifting to renewables. Our solar energy program has been exceptionally ambitious and gotten off to a flying start. The International Solar Alliance initiative reflects this priority. It is, however, nuclear energy that will constitute the core of this commitment and is therefore central to India's approach to climate change. In that regard, we are in a position now to build on the international cooperation openings that have been negotiated in the last decade and confirmed by the settlement of the liability issue. The path is open, once again, to a substantial increase in domestically produced nuclear power plants while simultaneously moving forward with foreign partners. These large anticipated investments in the nuclear energy sector can, however, only happen in a climate of predictability. In particular, it would require greater certainty of trading rules and technology access. It is our expectation that membership of the Nuclear Suppliers Group can effectively address that concern. A stronger Indian nuclear industry can help make nuclear power more competitive globally. Indeed, as our own nuclear industry expands and we go rapidly beyond the 140 nuclear-related export licenses that we issued last year, it is also in the larger interest that our practices are in conformity with global ones. If assured energy is one critical enabler to sustain and accelerate growth, then better connectivity and a modern infrastructure is the second. Considerable diplomatic energies are consequently devoted to this objective, where international partnerships can make a big difference. They build on infrastructure initiatives already underway, like the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, but also on more liberal FDI policies recently put in place for sectors like railways, ports, roads, and highways. There has been progress across a broad front, with some changes already visible on the ground, others moving out of the drawing board, and still more in different stages of the pipeline. Japan has been a particularly valued partner in this context, but China, some ASEAN members, Europe, and the United States are all coming into play in its many dimensions. These infrastructure developments will certainly have geopolitical repercussions. At the minimum, they would accelerate the global economic rebalancing by helping provide the foundation for India's manufacturing ambitions. But they would also correct historical imbalances, in particular by developing our eastern coast that was so neglected during the colonial period. In the Ministry of External Affairs, we have a particular responsibility towards the conceptualization and execution of connectivity projects relating to our immediate neighbors. Assessing the progress that we are making, I can predict with some confidence that regional connectivity will advance substantially in the next few years. So too will our access to the extended neighborhood. Projects underway in Bangladesh and Myanmar will certainly strengthen our Act East capabilities. On the west, the Chabahar port and other Iran-centered international transit initiatives will give us better access not just to Afghanistan, but to Central Asia, Russia, and even to Europe. Our encouragement to business stepping forward is obviously not oblivious to a strategic logic. A related issue is strengthening the ability of Indian businesses to effectively compete abroad. We cannot be impervious to the global trend of batting for your business, whether it is facilitating credit or access, undertaking networking or advocacy. This is increasingly a legitimate expectation that business has of the government. Building a Team India culture within and beyond the officialdom is very much a part of this thinking. that the Foreign Ministry today has specific divisions to focus on lines of credit, training, and projects abroad, underlines this more strategic view of business. But let me also state quite frankly that business too has to do its part if this is to be an effective partnership. That has not always been the case. While the reordering of the global system reflects opportunities that have been seized, they also come with their own burdens and responsibilities. It is evident that ensuring the security of the global commons and responding to its many challenges will increasingly have to be a shared endeavor. By virtue of its location, reflecting its ties of kinship and culture, and taking into account its growing commerce, India has a particular obligation in respect to the oceans in the south. We are responding vigorously and effectively through a more integrated strategy. Examples include white shipping agreements, coastal surveillance arrangements, hydrographic surveys, HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations, and naval exercises. Indeed, it is this maritime domain that has most expressively demonstrated the alignment that we are discussing. Of all the global challenges, none has captured the world's attention more than the threat of terrorism. Whether it is its orthodox version that this city knows only too well, or the most recent cyber manifestations, the intention remains one of dominating through disruption. National resilience and systemic hardening are obviously part of the answer, but equally important are preemptive and responsive policies. International cooperation in this regard has consequently come to occupy a very important place in our diplomatic agenda. While this is a subject in itself, let me just state that events have shown that a reputational downgrade is as damaging for a nation as it is for a company. To sum up, a comparison of statements and outcomes of Indian diplomacy over the last many decades will bring out how much more central economic and developmental issues have become to our external engagements. No high-level visit is complete today without a business event. Ensuring market access and responding to investor concerns are taken as a given. The advancement of flagship programs is clearly a key thrust. Enhancing national branding is a major preoccupation. Most important, a more global business outreach has widened the horizons of Indian diplomacy. A new normal is in the making, one where the business of Indian diplomacy is increasingly business. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary. I would now request our Bombay History Fellow, Ms. Sifra Lenton, to come on stage, please. And Foreign Secretary, would you please release the book, Bombay's International Linkages? Thank you very much, Sifra. And now we'll have the Q&As. Elvira and Kunal, you can read out the questions for Foreign Secretary Dr. Jaishankar. Thank you.
We have a question from Dipanjan Chaudhary. How hopeful are you of Chinese endorsements of India's membership to the NSG?
Diplomacy is an optimistic profession.
Elvira?
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone as well, please do hand your questions to either me or Kunal. I've got a few waiting as well, so do not hesitate. I have the pleasure of asking a question from very close to home. It's from a Mumbai car, and it relates to the event that you referred to in 2008, the unfortunate events here in Mumbai. The question from this individual is, where is the conversation on Pakistan? Mumbai is still hurting from those attacks, and are talks suspended or resumed?
Well, I think where we are today, I would just walk you back a few months. In December, we had agreed on a bilateral comprehensive bilateral dialogue with Pakistan. I was expected to go to Pakistan in January to sort of work out the modalities with my counterpart. Before that happened, you had the Pathankot airbase attack. And obviously when that happened, the focus shifted to the consequences of that attack and how to respond to that, and how to investigate and eventually prosecute those who were involved in it. So I think that is the state of play right now.
Kunal?
You mentioned about Prime Minister announcing our initiatives in San Francisco and Hanover. A question related to that, whether the new policies and initiatives of the government are actually capable of replacing made in China to made in India, and if so, when, how long will it take? So question by Satyendra Upadhyay.
Well, look, I don't think that is the objective, nor is that a reasonable expectation. I think made in China is made in China, and made in India is made in India. The two are very different societies, polities, economies. So I'm not sure, I really, as someone who's lived and worked in China, I don't really subscribe to this comparative sort of thinking. I would look at Make in India as a, if there is a comparison, I would make it with our own previous policies. And clearly there is a strong case to encourage manufacturing in this country. It obviously is not easily done, because you can draw on experiences of other countries, and certainly the experiences of China underline that you need a very strong infrastructure if you are to have an efficient, competitive manufacturing. And you also need skills for the human resources to support that manufacturing. So I would look at it more in our own sort of framework, and these are in some ways early years, but and perhaps I would say Mr. Godrej might be better positioned to comment on it, but my sense is that it's beginning to move.
Elvira?
I think what's very important is that the salience of manufacturing in our economy must rise. And that's, to my mind, what Make in India is all about.
Sorry, on the move. So we have another question now, and this is from a Nepalese delegate here, Mr. Krishna Prasad Seti, who asks, China is making an attempt to include Nepal in the One Belt, One Road policy, part of it says a new Silk Road, with massive infrastructure investment in Nepal and several vital infrastructure projects initiated by India and Nepal, which are long pending as well. Does India have any plans to accelerate them, is the question.
You know, my starting point for this question would be my ending point for the last one, which is, let's not pose everything in terms of China is doing this and India is doing that. I think India's relationship with Nepal is quite unique. If you look at where Nepalis travel, work, their trade routes, their energy flows, pretty much any indicator that one might use. I think the logic of the India-Nepal relationship is quite apparent. Now, China too is a neighbor of Nepal, and clearly that proximity would be reflected in different ways, but I think let's not confuse apples and oranges here.
Okay. I've got another question from the audience here. This time, again, from close to home, from Mr. Desai of the Observer Research Foundation in Mumbai. You mentioned earlier, with respect to responsibility towards the Indian Ocean, and oceans in the south, rather, and the maritime domain, and this question pertains to that. Looking at the issues around fishermen working in the region and the issues that they may face in terms of security and such. So the question here is, could a sustainable and humanitarian solution to the issues of the maritime areas be located at the level of SAARC? And can India, which faces this problem with other nations, including Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, take the lead?
Why don't I ask Dr. Harsha De Silva to answer it?
Why don't you start and I'll finish? I mean, this is the biggest irritant really between the relationship between Sri Lanka and India, and seems to not be able to find a solution. The issue in terms of quote-unquote Indian poaching in the northwestern states between the two countries, satellite imagery shows swamp of boats coming in, fishing in what we believe is our territory, and then go back out. The solutions, of course, one can think of tough solutions, but tough solutions are not what friendly countries adopt. And we need to determine some sort of convergence at some point. And this is a very difficult question to answer. And also the politics of South India has sort of overtaken the position of the center. Is that a question people ask us? So who do we talk to? Who do we deal with? Real questions that we haven't been able to solve. So at least in the context of disputes between India and Sri Lanka, we need to find a sustainable solution that is an economic one, find alternate livelihood for these fishermen, and perhaps that's the long-term answer. But for the short term, I don't know, unless Jaishankar, you have some solution for this.
No, I think we are trying to equip fishermen to go much deeper into the seas, so that the immediate areas of proximity are less contentious. But I believe we are looking at a visit by your Minister of Fisheries in the next few weeks. So it's something we hope to have a discussion on.
This one is from Sandhya Iyer. It is laudable to see paradigmic change in India's diplomacy. How is India planning to address vulnerabilities and development in the South-South cooperation, South-South trade, and South-South migration?
I mean, this could be a seminar in itself. I think if you look, for example, at South-South cooperation, we really made a huge effort to sort of raise our game with Africa last year with the India-Africa Forum Summit. In fact, my sense is if you look at the diplomatic activity this year with Africa, it would probably be almost unprecedented. I think you would have visits from India at very high levels. But we, in terms of, since this is about economics and strategy to some extent, we are actually, in a sense, trying to establish a larger economic footprint. And with that, sort of a developmental footprint and partly a cultural, political footprint. The lines of credit are particularly important to advance those economic partnerships with Africa. And they have been very ambitious lines of credit. They will take time to unfold, but clearly our intention is to move it up as fast as we can. I think we are, in many ways, we are trying to evolve our own model, if you would, on how we work our relationship with African countries more effectively. But in terms of the movement of people and trade, there are structural limitations, particularly in trade. I think we need to recognize that. But again, this country is increasingly an importer of resources too. And that is also something which needs to be factored in, as it is indeed an exporter of capital in some respects.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Atul Kulkarni of FINS here in Mumbai, who asks, how would you define New Age India's foreign policy? There's a citation here that says, from reactive to proactive engagement with many nations on diverse areas.
Could you just repeat that? I missed something at the beginning.
Of course. The question was, how would you define New Age India's foreign policy?
How would you define a new age policy? Well, I thought those remarks of mine did it. It's possible that they may not have been well communicated, but I would sum it up this way. In many ways, it's more economic. It's very much more focused on how foreign policy external engagements can be utilized for national development priorities and goals. It's also really, in a sense, you are engaging different nations at the same time on various issues, sometimes overlapping issues, competitive issues. So how to play with everybody as dexterously as you can, getting the most out of it. I think that's really the nature of the game in a way has changed. I mean, that's, if you look west of India, that's visible. You look east of India, that is visible. Working yourself into the right place, the optimal place in the system, I think that is how I would describe it.
The last question from Kunal, please.
There's a question from Mark Hanna. What is India's view on the possible exit from the EU of the UK later this month?
I think we'll wait for the results.
Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for this wonderful, stimulating discussion. Dr. Jaishankar, thank you very much. Mr. Adi Godrej, thank you very much. Minister Silva, thank you very much on behalf of Gateway House. Please join us for drinks and dinner. Thank you.